The lights were bright, the crowd was loud, and her voice rose above everything. Leah sang like her life depended on it. She moved across the stage with fire in her eyes and strength in her voice. The fans screamed her name, waving posters and glowing sticks. They saw freedom and power in her performance, but behind her smile was a heavy chain no one could see. Backstage, as soon as she left the stage, her manager, Paul, a tall white man in a sharp suit, grabbed her arm. His smile was wide, but his grip was tighter than it needed to be. "Good job, Leah," he said. "But don't forget, stick to the script. No talking about money, no talking about contracts. Just sing. That's what they pay for." Leah forced a smile, nodding, but inside, her heart screamed. She had written the songs. She had poured her soul into the music. Yet every dollar, every check, went to Paul and the company he worked for. She only got enough to survive. She was a bird in a golden cage, with broken wings. At night, when she lay in her hotel room alone, she stared at the ceiling and whispered, "How much longer can I take this?" The next morning, Paul called her into his office. The walls were covered with gold records, all under his name, not hers. "Leah," he said smoothly, "you have another tour next month. Europe this time. Bigger venues. More money." Leah frowned. "More money for who?" she asked quietly. Paul's smile faded. He leaned forward. "Careful, Leah. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. You sing, you smile, you shine. That's your job. Leave the business to us." Her fists clenched under the table. She wanted to scream, but she stayed silent. She had learned that one wrong word could end everything. As she left the office, she looked back at him. For the first time, her silence felt like poison in her mouth. The tour in Europe was harder than she imagined. The flights were endless, the shows back to back. Leah's voice cracked sometimes, her body ached, but Paul pushed her harder. "You're strong," he told her, "and the world is watching. Don't mess this up." But Leah wasn't just tired, she was angry. She looked at the posters plastered in every city. Her face, her name, her songs. Yet when she asked for money to send to her sick mother back home, Paul gave her excuses. One night in Paris, after a concert, Leah sneaked into the accounting office backstage. Papers lay in neat stacks. She flipped through them and froze. Millions of dollars. Her music had earned millions. But next to her name, the payment was almost nothing. Her breath shook. "He's stealing everything," she whispered. When she confronted Paul, he didn't even deny it. He smirked and leaned back in his chair. "Leah, that's how this business works. You think you're the first? Everyone signs the contract. Everyone pays the price. You should be thankful I made you a star." Her anger burned. "A star with empty pockets," she said. Paul's smile sharpened. "Remember the contract. You break it, you lose everything. Your songs, your name, even your voice belongs to us. Don't test me." Leah walked out of his office, her chest tight. But something had shifted inside her. For the first time, fear was turning into fire. Leah began writing in secret. Not songs for the company, but her story. Every night, she poured her pain, her truth, onto paper. She wrote about the stolen royalties, the silenced voices, the artists before her who had vanished after speaking out. She knew this was dangerous. If Paul found out, he could end her career forever. But she also knew she couldn't stay quiet anymore. One night after a show in London, she whispered to her reflection in the mirror, "They own my songs, but they don't own my soul." Paul noticed the change in her. On stage, she still sang with fire, but backstage, she no longer bowed her head. She asked questions. She demanded answers. And worst of all, for him, she began speaking to other artists. One young singer, Anna, came to her in tears. "They're taking all my money too," she confessed. "I don't know what to do." Leah hugged her tightly. For the first time, Leah realized she wasn't alone. The chains wrapped around many voices, not just hers. And maybe, just maybe, if they stood together, they could break them. Paul wasn't blind. He called Leah into his office again. "You're getting bold," he said, his voice low. "That's dangerous. You think you're bigger than the company? You're not. Remember your place." But Leah didn't flinch. "My place is on stage. And that stage doesn't belong to you." His face twisted with anger. "Careful, Leah. One word from me, and you'll disappear. No one will ever hear your voice again." For the first time, Leah smiled coldly. Then maybe the world should hear the truth instead. Leah hired a lawyer in secret. His name was John, a quiet man with sharp eyes. He read through her contract slowly, page by page. "This is one of the worst contracts I've ever seen," he told her. "It gives them everything. But there are loopholes. If we fight hard, you might win." Leah felt her heart race. "Then let's fight." But John warned her, "It won't be easy. They'll try to ruin you. They'll dig up dirt, twist the story, use the media against you. You need to be ready for war." Leah nodded. "I've been in chains too long. War is better than silence." The news hit the industry like a storm. Leah was suing the company. She wanted her royalties, her freedom, and her voice back. The headlines exploded. Some fans supported her, some doubted her, but everyone was watching. Paul went on television, painting her as greedy and ungrateful. "We made her a star," he said smoothly. "Now she wants to destroy us." Leah stayed quiet, letting the court speak for her. But inside, she burned with fear and fury. Every time she walked into the courtroom, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every silenced artist before her. The trial began, and the company fought dirty. They released false stories about Leah, calling her difficult, unstable, even violent. Old friends betrayed her for money, telling lies on the stand. Leah sat there, listening, her hands trembling. But when it was her turn, she stood tall. "I wrote the songs," she said firmly. "I poured my heart into them. And while I struggled to pay rent, they made millions. This is not just my story, it's the story of every artist they used." Her voice shook, but her words were fire. The courtroom fell silent. The trial dragged on for weeks. Leah walked into the courthouse every morning with cameras flashing in her face. Fans shouted her name, reporters shoved microphones at her, and Paul always walked in behind her with that smug smile, acting as though he was untouchable. But inside the courtroom, cracks were starting to show. Leah's lawyer, John, pulled out contracts, receipts, emails. Each one showed the same pattern: money earned in Leah's name was going into Paul's pockets and the company's vault. The judge leaned forward, frowning. "Mr. Paul, can you explain why these royalty statements list millions in revenue while the artist received less than 1%? Paul's jaw tightened. He smirked, but his eyes betrayed his nerves. "That's industry standard," he said smoothly. Leah knew what she was signing. Leah's chest burned, but she stayed calm. She wanted to scream that she had been only 19 when she signed, desperate and alone, but she knew her words had more power when spoken with strength. She let John speak for her, piece by piece pulling apart the lies Paul had built. One afternoon after court, Leah returned to her hotel room to find a threatening note slipped under her door. "Drop the case or lose everything." Her hands shook as she read it. She knew it was from Paul's people. She called John right away. "They're trying to scare me," she whispered. John sighed. "They will. They'll use every trick. But remember, fear is their weapon. If you let it silence you, they win." That night, Leah stood at the window, looking out over the city lights. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered, "I won't stop. Not this time." The company unleashed its full force. They pulled her songs from the radio. They banned her from award shows. They told streaming platforms to push her music down the charts. Overnight, her career seemed to collapse. But something unexpected happened. Fans started sharing her songs online, without permission, spreading them like wildfire. Young artists posted videos saying, "Leah's fight is our fight." Concertgoers held up signs reading, "Justice for Leah." The company had money and power, but Leah had the people. For the first time, Paul looked nervous in public. The media began to turn. Reporters asked harder questions. Even some artists under the same company whispered about wanting to join Leah's side. The chains were rattling, and everyone could hear it. In court, Leah finally took the stand. She looked around at the judge, the jury, and the sea of cameras waiting outside the door. Her heart pounded, but she breathed deeply. "They told me I was lucky," she said. "Lucky to sing, lucky to be on stage. But how lucky is it to work without pay? How lucky is it to watch your songs climb the charts while you can't afford to buy a home for your mother? They silenced me. They told me to smile and sing. But I am not just a voice. I am a person. And I deserve to be free." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned back, thoughtful. Paul shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his smugness cracking. But Paul wasn't done fighting. He brought in high-powered lawyers, experts who twisted every word Leah had said. They claimed she was unstable, ungrateful, and reckless. They tried to paint her as a diva who wanted more than she earned. Leah sat still, listening. Her fists clenched under the table. But then John stood and calmly reminded the court of the facts, the missing millions, the false royalty reports, the young age at which Leah had signed. He finished with one sentence that shook the room: "This is not just about Leah. This is about an industry that has fed on young black voices for decades while keeping them silent. If we don't stop it here, it will never end." The judge nodded slowly. The jury looked uneasy. The balance was shifting. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered every day. They sang Leah's songs, chanting her name. Some carried posters with the words "Break the Chains." Others wore shirts with her face, standing in the rain, shouting for justice. Leah walked past them each morning, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to hug them all, but she knew her job was to keep walking, to keep fighting inside. Their voices gave her strength. Paul saw the crowds too. His smile grew weaker each day. For the first time in his career, he was not in control of the story. Leah was rewriting it in real time. As the trial neared its end, Leah's lawyer revealed the most shocking piece of evidence. It was a hidden recording of Paul himself, laughing with another executive. His voice filled the courtroom: "She's young, she's desperate. We'll bleed her dry before she even knows what hit her." Gasps filled the room. Leah's eyes widened. She remembered that night she had been waiting outside the office, too scared to knock. She hadn't realized someone else had recorded it. Paul's face went pale. For the first time, he had no words. That night, Leah couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her body shook, not with fear but with the weight of hope. She thought about her mother, who used to tell her, "Your voice is your gift, Leah. Never let anyone steal it." She thought about Anna and all the other young artists trapped in contracts they couldn't escape. She thought about the fans chanting outside. Tomorrow, the jury would decide. Tomorrow, everything could change. She whispered to the darkness, "Please, let the chains break." The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Journalists filled every seat, cameras lined the walls, and the air buzzed with tension. Leah sat at the front, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Paul sat across from her, pale and sweating, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. The jury filed in. The foreman stood, holding the slip of paper that held Leah's fate. The room held its breath. The judge asked, "What is your decision?" The foreman cleared his throat and read the words that would change everything. The foreman's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. "We find in favor of Leah." For a moment, there was no sound. Then the room erupted. Gasps, cheers, cries filled the air. Leah sat frozen in her chair, her hands covering her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. John put a steady hand on her shoulder, whispering, "You did it." Paul's face turned red. He slammed his hand against the table, shouting, "This is ridiculous. She's nothing without me. Nothing." But the judge's gavel cut through his rage. "Order! Mr. Paul, control yourself." Leah finally stood, her legs shaking but her back straight. She turned and looked at the crowd. Reporters snapped photos, fans sobbed, and young artists smiled with hope in their eyes. For the first time, Leah felt the chains around her heart break. The victory was huge, but the war wasn't over. Paul's company immediately announced they would appeal. Their lawyers promised to drag the case higher, to a bigger court. They weren't going to let Leah walk away so easily. That night, Leah stood outside the courthouse, speaking to the crowd. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but her words carried power. "This is not just my win," she said. "This is for every artist who has been silenced, for every dream stolen. We will not be quiet anymore." The crowd roared. They chanted her name, their voices rising into the night. Leah felt her heart swell. Even if the fight continued, she wasn't alone anymore. Paul retreated into the shadows, but his anger grew hotter each day. He called meetings with other executives, whispering about blacklists and smear campaigns. "If she wants war," he hissed, "we'll give her war." But the industry was changing. Some companies began quietly revising contracts. Lawyers representing young artists used Leah's case as evidence. Slowly, doors were opening. The chains were weakening. Paul saw it all slipping through his fingers. The empire he built on stolen voices was crumbling. And the woman he once controlled was now the face of a movement. Leah moved back home for a while, away from the flashing cameras and noise. She sat with her mother on the porch, drinking tea, feeling the breeze on her face. Her mother smiled, proud but worried. "You've started something big, Leah. But you know they won't stop coming for you." Leah nodded. "I know. But I'm not afraid anymore. They took so much from me, Mama. They can't take my soul." Her mother reached over, holding her hand. "Then sing again. Not for them, but for you." That night, Leah picked up her guitar for the first time in months. She sang softly, tears falling as her own words filled the room. For the first time, the music felt free. But Paul wasn't finished. He hired private investigators, digging into Leah's past. He leaked fake stories to tabloids, painting her as reckless, selfish, even dangerous. "If I can't own her," he snarled, "I'll destroy her." The media swirled with rumors. Some fans doubted. Sponsors pulled out of deals. Leah's name was dragged through the mud. One night, scrolling through headlines on her phone, Leah broke down. She threw the phone across the room and sobbed. "I can't take it anymore," she whispered. John sat with her, calm and steady. "Leah, listen to me. They're trying to make you quit. That's their only weapon left. If you stand firm, if you keep telling the truth, you'll win again." Leah wiped her tears. She remembered the faces of the young artists who had thanked her, the crowds that had chanted her name. She whispered to herself, "I won't break." The appeal trial began months later. It was even bigger than before, with television networks broadcasting every word. Millions watched worldwide as Leah once again stood before the court. Paul looked thinner, angrier, his eyes bloodshot. But his lawyers were ruthless, throwing everything they had at Leah. They tried to twist her victory into a mistake, a fraud, a trick. But Leah was stronger now. She spoke with calm fire, her words sharp as knives. "This is not just about contracts," she said. "It's about dignity. It's about voices that were never meant to be silenced. The world was listening. And Paul knew it. Outside, thousands filled the radio. They banned her from award shows. They told streaming platforms to push her music down the charts. Overnight, her career seemed to collapse. But something unexpected happened. Fans started sharing her songs online, without permission, spreading them like wildfire. Young artists posted videos saying, "Leah's fight is our fight." Concertgoers held up signs reading, "Justice for Leah." The company had money and power, but Leah had the people. For the first time, Paul looked nervous in public. The media began to turn. Reporters asked harder questions. Even some artists under the same company whispered about wanting to join Leah's side. The chains were rattling, and everyone could hear it. In court, Leah finally took the stand. She looked around at the judge, the jury, and the sea of cameras waiting outside the door. Her heart pounded, but she breathed deeply. "They told me I was lucky," she said. "Lucky to sing, lucky to be on stage. But how lucky is it to work without pay? How lucky is it to watch your songs climb the charts while you can't afford to buy a home for your mother? They silenced me. They told me to smile and sing. But I am not just a voice. I am a person. And I deserve to be free." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned back, thoughtful. Paul shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his smugness cracking. But Paul wasn't done fighting. He brought in high-powered lawyers, experts who twisted every word Leah had said. They claimed she was unstable, ungrateful, and reckless. They tried to paint her as a diva who wanted more than she earned. Leah sat still, listening. Her fists clenched under the table. But then John stood and calmly reminded the court of the facts, the missing millions, the false royalty reports, the young age at which Leah had signed. He finished with one sentence that shook the room: "This is not just about Leah. This is about an industry that has fed on young black voices for decades while keeping them silent. If we don't stop it here, it will never end." The judge nodded slowly. The jury looked uneasy. The balance was shifting. The streets, holding up signs, singing Leah's songs in unison. It was no longer just about her case, it was a movement. Backstage chains, one banner read, "Will be broken forever." Leah looked out from the courthouse steps and felt the power of their voices. She wasn't just fighting in court anymore. She was leading something much larger, something unstoppable. Paul, watching from a distance, clenched his fists. For the first time, he realized the truth: Leah had already won, even if the court hadn't ruled yet. The courtroom was heavy with silence as the appeal trial reached its end. Weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and endless arguments had exhausted everyone. But Leah stood tall, her voice unshaken, her eyes burning with truth. Paul's lawyers gave their final speech, sharp and polished, trying to twist the story into a simple contract dispute. She signed. She agreed. She got fame. That is all. Then Leah's lawyer, John, rose slowly. He didn't raise his voice, but the courtroom leaned in as he spoke. This is not just about a signature. It is about exploitation, about an industry that has used artists like tools, especially young black voices who were told they should be grateful for scraps while others grew rich off their work. Leah's courage has pulled back the curtain. Now, this court must decide: do we allow the chains to remain, or do we break them? When the jury left to decide, Leah's chest pounded. Hours passed. Then the door opened. Everyone stood. The foreman read the verdict: "We find in favor of Leah, and the contract is declared void. The company must pay full royalties owed." Furthermore, the court recognizes this case as precedent for future artist exploitation claims. Leah gasped. She covered her face, tears streaming. The courtroom erupted with cheers. Outside, the streets thundered with celebration. Paul slumped into his chair, pale and defeated. His empire was falling. News of Leah's victory spread across the world. Headlines blazed, singer breaks chains of exploitation, court ruling shakes music industry, artists demand change. Young singers and rappers began posting videos thanking Leah. Because of her, I can fight my contract, one said. Another whispered, she saved us. Leah sat in her small kitchen at home, reading letters from artists she had never met. Some were from kids still in school, dreaming of music but scared of the industry. Others were from older musicians who had given up years ago. All of them said the same thing, thank you. Her mother hugged her tightly. Leah, she whispered, you didn't just free yourself. You freed them too. For the first time, Leah felt peace. But she also knew it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Paul tried to fight back in the press, but his words were hollow. His company lost sponsors, artists began leaving, and investors pulled their money. One by one, the walls of his empire collapsed. Late one night, Paul sat alone in his office, staring at the gold records on his walls. They once filled him with pride, but now they mocked him. He whispered bitterly, she ruined me. But deep down, he knew the truth, he had ruined himself. Decades of greed and exploitation had finally caught up with him. Leah was simply the spark that lit the fire. Meanwhile, Leah embraced her new role. She started a foundation called Free Voices, offering legal help to young artists, teaching them about contracts, and giving them a safe space to create without chains. Her first press conference as founder was streamed worldwide. She stood at a podium, simple and strong, no glitter, no stage lights, just her. This isn't about me, she said. It's about every artist who was told to be quiet. Every artist who was tricked into signing their soul away. We're here to make sure that never happens again. The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. Leah smiled, not as a pop star, but as a leader. Months later, Leah returned to the stage, not under Paul's company, not under anyone's control. She sang her own songs, free at last, her voice carrying years of pain, power, and hope. The stadium was full, but this time, she wasn't singing for a contract or a company. She was singing for herself, her mother, the young artists, and every voice that had ever been silenced. As the crowd sang with her, thousands of voices rising together, Leah felt it deep in her soul. The chains were gone. And they would never return.